whenever you're ready to kick off, we're going to get started.
Say the serenity prayer. Say the serenity prayer, though. Okay.
May we have a moment of silence, followed by Mike and Diane starting up again. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. I'm glad to have so many people here. And I meant to do this before the other session. I always try to do this before I say anything or speak. And I just encourage you to invite your higher power, whatever that might be, into the room, and that you get to hear whatever it is I say that maybe you need to hear today, and ask the higher power to speak through me, please, and take me out of this. Because for me, I'll try to give you examples and everything, but I really rely on my higher power, because I'll have people come up to me always and say, I love what you said, da, 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 and I'll say, I don't have no idea I said that, I think you hear something different than what I say, but I believe you hear what you need to hear, and no matter how I say it. So I encourage you to invite your higher power with that and speak through us. So with that, we're going to go to Tradition 4. And the AA's Tradition 4 says each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. And Al-Anon says each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting another group or Al-Anon or AA as a whole. And in the relationship version, each member is autonomous except in matters affecting the other one, our family or society as a whole. And so the thing about autonomy, I'll read this paragraph to start. I'm going to start my stopwatch here too, so I have a clue. Thank you. With Tradition 5, it says, sailing in uncharted sea, we drift aimlessly unless we can set a course and head toward a destination. Tradition 5 is the beacon that gives the fellowship its direction and goal. Each Al-Anon family group has but one purpose: to guide family members of alcoholics to find the strength within themselves to overcome their difficulties. Our common experience is living with alcoholism. That is where we can share our strength and hope. If Al-Anon's singleness of purpose were diluted, we would no longer be able to identify, and our own recovery would suffer. This tradition also defines how to help. First, we ourselves practice the 12 steps. We can reach out a useful hand only after we have gained some spiritual recovery ourselves through the steps. Our second tool to help is dependent on the first. We must change our attitude, grow past anger, fear, or desire for retaliation before we can understand our alcoholic relatives and friends. We must have gained some serenity within ourselves through practice of the 12 steps before we can encourage, primarily through our example, those who have affected our lives with the disease of alcoholism. And so for me, on Tradition 4, it gave me a lot of freedom knowing that I had autonomy to make my own choices. And because I always made choices with fear in the background. It was always, I'll do this because of that, or this might happen. I always went along with people and other things and didn't make my own decisions, really didn't follow my heart or my own mind even. I would always just go let the fear rule it and just go along. And then of course I'd build resentments and all that stuff because I didn't speak up for myself. And I think with autonomy, there's also, I've got to have a balance between my autonomy and somebody else's freedom to be and do whatever it is. That it doesn't affect them. It's not harming them in any way. Because I can do things and say, I'm doing this for me, and not look at everybody else or anybody else that it might be affecting. So I've got to be careful with that autonomy. There's a lot of responsibility in that. I've got to communicate. And communication is going to come up a lot in these traditions for me anyway. I found myself communication is the key, and participation is the key. And I really believe that it's just the thread throughout the whole of the traditions. And I have to, and one thing I've learned in here is that, sorry, my timer is going off and I don't have a clue why. Oh, I guess it's set in an hour. Sorry, wrong timer. Where did I go with that? That just blew me away.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, it will. I'll look at my notes here, and that might help. I have to make sure, when I talk about the communication stuff, when I am making a decision, I have to do it and speak to Mike, speak to the children, speak to my coworkers, speak to my family members, whoever it is that I'm making this decision, whoever it affects. I need to be able to see that there's no conflict that's going to arise with that. And, even if the person, maybe Mike, doesn't like a decision that I'm making and doesn't agree with me, as long as it's not really harming him and stuff, sometimes I have to follow my heart in that too. So there's a lot of balance. I have to look at, who's it affecting and how is it going to be. And two, another thing in that, when I make a decision, a lot of the slogans, how important is it, really comes into play for me. I have to look at that, and I have to talk to my sponsor about it and really weigh on that to see, is it something I really have to do, or just something that I need to do, or something I want to do. And so I have to do it with a lot of prayer, make decisions. I try to, whatever I do, try to bring my higher power into the decision making and pray about that. In our family member, I used to, we didn't have autonomy in our family. When it came to the boys, parents made the decision. When it came in my family, growing up, Dad and Mom made the decisions for us, and we were going to do whatever they wanted to do, trips, whatever it is. We really weren't consulted. And so that was the same way we did too. I would make the decision and we would go along with it. And usually, I'd just tell them this is what we're doing, and without really checking in with anybody. And I've learned to do that differently today. Also, with my children growing up, fortunately, they were young enough when we got into the program. They were 8 and 11, that I didn't have to be that enforcer, and have it my way all the time. I got to be able to let them try out. So I encouraged them to try out different sports, anything they were maybe interested in. I encouraged them. They wanted to do music, piano, flute, drums, what other ones, the guitar, just all kinds of different things that they wanted to do. I encouraged them to do it and to stick with it, the commitment that maybe they had made to it, unless it was harming them or something like that. I didn't push that. But we are all so different, every one of us in the family, totally different, in that, Mike said earlier, he likes fishing, he likes car racing, and that kind of thing. He's that's his thing. I give him that autonomy to do those things. Sometimes I go with him. It depends on what I'm feeling for the time. Do I want to, be with him and just spend the time? It may not be my most exciting thing to go do. I may change my plans for the day because I want to spend time with him. That's what's important for me that day. And other days, no, I'd rather stay home and take it easy and maybe go swim or do something that I want to do. But giving me the freedom to make those choices and knowing that, taking away the fear of it, that if this is going to break us up, it's going to break us up. I'm not that powerful over something like that. But, I just have to rely on all that. I told you about the prayer and all that. When it came to money and divorce, and money was, like Mike said, I was going to take all his money, and for me, he was going to divorce me. Those were some of our fears that we had. I came to the thing that, the only thing that we've got a decision that we make that some people don't go with, but it's encouraged in at least my program or the other, that is our autonomy with our programs and stuff. We have our own autonomy to do our programs the way we want to do it, but he sponsors men and I sponsor women. We don't cross those barriers because with our history, that's going to be a problem for me anyway. And it's going to bring up old stuff. And we've agreed, we talked about it, we've discussed it, And, that's something we agree on, that he will only sponsor men. And he's had women want to have him be a sponsor. And I said, that just makes me uncomfortable and stuff. And he respects that. There's a lot of respect in making our decisions. We have to go with respect. And so the other things, let's see, in our house, we have to be flexible also. It doesn't have to be strict. My decision, I can actually be flexible sometimes with things. And knowing that, I don't have to, if I make a decision, I don't have to stick with it 100%. I can actually be flexible with it. That I think that goes with the boundaries we talk about in Al-Anon. And that, setting boundaries, they're flexible. And they're not walls anymore. I used to build nothing but walls. And they were immovable. And today they can change, and they do. As we both progress in our program, they can change. But I love the another thing that has changed in my life is I grew up hearing gossip, and I just thought that was everybody gossiped. That was normal. That was just part of it, and I didn't really realize the damage that it was causing, and learning that's one of our things in Al-Anon that will ruin a meeting and everything. I learned there, we don't gossip. And today when I'm around people, I've actually had some friends and we used to take a trip together, and a bunch of girlfriends, and some of that behavior just was really, as I got in the program and realized the damage that can do, I had to stop going on those trips. It was just made me so uncomfortable to be around that all the time. And I didn't want to address it to them because then I'm judging them and all. They're not in program or anything. And I just thought it was easier for me to back out of that group and not do it, not do those certain kind of behaviors that might, if they're autonomous to do that, that's their choice to do that. But my choice today is not to participate in some of those things that were my defects. I have to stray away from those kind of things. And let's see what else I have. In our family, I think, and now, today, as my children have gotten older, and Mike too, he retired many years ago, and I just decided not to retire until like a year later so we could plan to travel and do all this stuff, empty nesters, and I retired a year after he did, but it wasn't for me. I missed my job that I did. I got to work with children, and I loved doing that. And so I went back to work after a couple of years being retired, and did that job for about 4 years, and then I chose to leave that because of some behaviors there too that I didn't want to be around. And so that being able to make those hard choices, but know that it was healthy for me to do those things. And it was okay with Mike that, it wasn't harming the relationship that I went back to work. It was part-time. And today, I've gone back. I've retired twice from that job, and now I do a little part-time job. And Mike gives me that autonomy to be able to do that. It doesn't interfere with our relationship, our traveling, in that my boss gives me the autonomy to say I can't be there on a Friday because I'm traveling. She's very supportive of doing this. Her family was, she knows I do this, and her whole family was riddled with alcoholism, and she encourages me. So it's wonderful to be able to do that. Now, if that was something that was a hard thing for her, I think I would not probably be working there on certain days just because of that. This service work is so important for me, not speaking, but service work, and if it interferes, but I know I just have to do what, if I've prayed about it and doesn't harm anybody else, then that's pretty much my decision, and with prayerful meditation on all these things. But being able to go with my heart and my mind and make those choices today has really changed I think our relationship, in that I give him the freedom to do what he wants to do, and he doesn't have to do it my way. And, or do you? He doesn't let me know anyway if he does. And one last thing I noticed on my notes here that I wanted to mention too is today, I lived in silence was very common in our family. When we were angry, we were silent. When we were, whatever, the silent was used as a weapon rather than anything healthy. Today, I can have autonomy to speak or not and communicate, but sometimes silence today is like he just did the zip. Sometimes silence is okay. That's something different in our house today, that it's a healthy silence. It's not a weapon anymore. And the gossip and the silence, the things I used to use in a negative way today, it's positive. And lastly, I'll say with our grandchild and our children, they live California. All of them live out in California, and they all do their own thing. And it's not my business what my grandchild does or my sons do. They are living their life, and I give them autonomy to do it without any judgment and saying, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" I wouldn't do that. And that, those things I used to say before. Today, I just keep my mouth shut, and I just say, I wish you well. I hope it works out for you. Go for it. If they're following their passion and it makes them happy, what business is it of mine? They're grown now. I have to stay out of their stuff. And like it was shared somebody else today at the table, this is something that in the last few years is just so important for me, is that my only job with my kids and my grandkids is to love them. And God, it feels good to stay out of all that other stuff. And sure, I worry about them. I'm a mom. But I pray for them. And God's got them. He has no grandchildren. And, as a family, we stay connected. We've got we're going to go out there at Thanksgiving and visit with them, but we speak on a regular basis. We FaceTime or Zoom or whatever every week with our children. And, we just get to encourage them and find out what they're doing. And my son, both of them have had to go through some really bad decisions, maybe you would call that, but they were learning decisions. I think for me, the most powerful thing I can do is stay out of it and let God work in it and let them learn the lesson from God, from their higher power. And, I've seen our kids try things and they've worked and then other things have not. But guess what? They learned the lesson because I stayed out of it. Mom didn't have to fix it. And because I'm in the job of fixing everybody. And I want to leave that job to some of the newcomers, thanks. I'm in with that.
I found that most of the time, the most spiritual thing I can do is just shut up. So that helps a lot. Tradition 4 allows me personal freedom, individual freedom. We're autonomous. We can do what we want, and as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, and that's the deal. And sometimes that's really a clear-cut thing, and sometimes it's not. When I first got sober, I was so scared of drinking again. I wanted to change so bad that I did everything that I could, and I went to a lot of meetings. And I'd been going to meetings, I don't know, maybe a month or two. I don't know exactly when it was. And Diane let me know, hey, what's going on here? You're still not home. Maybe you're going to too many of those meetings. I mean, instead of being at the Cockeyed Camel every night, I'm off to an AA meeting. So I wasn't at home, and she was there with young children. And at first I thought, okay, well, I'll just quit going to meetings for a while. And I did that for about 2 weeks, and I about went crazy. And fortunately, my sponsor had given me Chuck C's new pair of glasses. He gave me the cassettes because he knew I couldn't read because my brain was just scrambled. And he made a point in there that when he moved, that his wife wanted him to stay home. When they moved to this other house, and he tried that, and he just couldn't do it. And I realized that, my primary purpose is to stay sober. If I don't stay sober in AA right now, today, on Friday, all bets are off for anything. And I know that I sacrificed family time at home to my wife and my young sons when I first got sober. I know that was a sacrifice for them. But if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be sitting up here today, I don't think. If I hadn't done everything, my sponsor told me, take every edge you can because alcoholism wants you deader than fried chicken. And so I did that. Now, having said that, because I went through the 12 steps, I was able to make direct amends to both my sons and to Diane. And I've worked on building relationships with them for a long time. I've tried the best I can to make up for that. But that was still lost time. And what I want to share is, particularly if you're new, Diane and I got asked to do a family afterward workshop when we were I think we were like 14 or 15 years into this deal. And we got asked to do this family afterwards workshop. That's the first time we'd ever been asked to do something like that. And so I thought we thought it'd be interesting to ask our sons, what was it like for you? And because we had never asked them that. Of course, they're grown now. And when we asked both of our sons, what was it like when I first got sober? And my older son, just like that, said, you were my hero. I looked up to you. I thought you were the greatest thing in the world. And then all of a sudden one day you came in and said you were an alcoholic and drug addict and had to go to treatment and go to these meetings. And he said, I was devastated. And I never knew that. I never knew that happened to him. But he said he was devastated and he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know where to go with that. And fortunately, Diane took them to Alateen, and he said, I found other kids there that had the same thing, and I could talk to them. And that's when I realized the value of Alateen. But I never knew that's what I did to him. I was so concerned with getting sober and, putting these fires out that I had that I didn't know that. And our younger son, who was 8, said that the only thing he remembers is that we quit going to the baseball games. I had season tickets over the dugout of the Nashville Sounds baseball team in Nashville, and we went to the baseball games every time. There's like 78 games a year. And of course, all I did was sit there and drink long neck Budweisers the whole game. I went there to drink. It was one of my old playgrounds. So when I got sober, we didn't go to the baseball games anymore. And I thought it was all for me to keep me sober. I didn't realize that was quality time that my 8-year-old son thought of as a family, and that stopped. So I can't, like I said, I've tried to make living amends to both of them and be in their lives, and I have great relationships with both of them, but I could have done that a little better. So if you're new, you might try doing something a little bit better on that. The other thing, one thing too, Diane mentioned she'll do things with me sometimes because she wants to be with me. I really don't want her to fish with me very often because she's really good and she shows me up every time we go. She always gets the biggest fish. She has a history of that in her family. And, if I've got that freedom to be an individual, but if I'm making plans, I don't care what it is, whether it involves money or not. I always ask Diane, I said, is this okay for, can we do that? We had a habit in the past of we would obligate us to go somewhere with somebody else or to go, do something with somebody else. And we found out that doesn't work out very well. And so we don't do that anymore. Or we do it less, a lot less. I'm not saying we don't do it at all, but we do that a lot less because I want to check with her and make sure that it doesn't affect her. My primary purpose is to stay sober in AA, But if I don't take this out into my family, what have I done? I'm just still living a selfish and self-centered life. I want the best for my family. So I just remember our common welfare.
I've got
Tradition
5.
5.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't know if anybody was smart enough or caught it. I read Tradition 5 out of that book. I went back to look at it and I was like, well, that's what I read. I don't know. I guess they're all the same in a lot of the ways, because I know what I've got here on Tradition 5, I just talked about in 4 too. Tradition 5, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. That's AA's. Al-Anon's is each Al-Anon family group has but one purpose: to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of AA ourselves, and by encouraging and understanding our alcoholic relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics. And the relationship one says, in a relationship has one primary purpose: to love each other and to serve as an expression of God's love. So I think, first of all, that what that tells me, and especially on the Al-Anon one, is that I've got to be healthy. And I can't pass on what I don't have. I've got to work the steps. I've got to work these traditions. I've got to work the context. I've got to be of service. I've got to be able to be the best Al-Anon that anybody that doesn't know the Al-Anon, they can see. I've got to be that book for them, and as much as I can, by example. And I've got to encourage, my sponsees to do the same. I'm very big on service. I say, if you want what I've got, you do what I do. And service is my primary thing, to be of service to the group, to pay back what it's given me. It's given me my whole life and everything, my family and everything else, my jobs. It's all as a result of that. And so for me, I've got to be able to encourage. And encouragement for me is what I talked about a minute ago with my children. I encourage them to follow their dreams, not my dreams, because I had different plans for them totally, and they have gone by the wayside whatsoever, 180 degrees different than what I thought they would be and would have been good at. But I encourage them, again, to follow their dreams. I've got to work the steps as far as, use prayer, use my time prayer meditation, use all the steps with them. I have to make amends. Do what my parents never did. I always said when I was going to have kids that I would always tell them I'm sorry when I make a mistake. And, I didn't do that. I thought I did, but I had to make amends and stuff to them formally once I got into the program and did my steps. I flew out to California and met with my younger son, who was out there then. My oldest was still in Nashville. So I remember flying out there and making amends to him for some stuff. And, of course, he's the one that's had some trouble, and the amends I made to him I thought was such a big deal, because I'd put them off forever because I didn't want to, have to go through that. It was my guilt that I was carrying a lot. And when I made those amends to him, he was like, well, Mom, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't remember that. And, I sweated over that for, years, I'm sure, and felt so bad about what I'd done. And he had no clue what I was talking about. And, but I had to be that example. I still have to make those amends. It doesn't matter if they don't remember it. For me, it does matter if it's going to harm them. But for me, it was something that I had to do. And I have to do that today. I have to be that example. Mike, and I encourage him to follow his stuff and do what he does. But today, it took us a long time to get here, but we both today, admit when we're wrong, and we say, and I want to admit here that he had to start doing it first before I started doing it. When he started doing it and saying, I was wrong, I should have done it this way, I'm sorry, what can I do to make it right? It gave me it was like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. Just on little things, just throughout the day. And both of us are really, I think, better about that than we've ever been. And so I do that with my kids. When I jump in and want to fix something real quick, I'm usually on the phone with them because I'm not there in person. But I have to back up when I catch myself being that helpful mom which helpfulness is a sunny side of control, by the way. And I thought that was a big compliment. I thought that was good, that you were helpful, and that sunny side of control is good, right? For any of those new people, no, I was wrong. I was wrong, I admit it. But I catch myself doing that with my kids, even on the phone or whatever today, and I'll just say, hey, let me retract that. I'm just being a mom. Sorry, mom jumped in there, and that's not my job today and stuff. I take back what I just said, or, I'm sorry about it, whatever, and talk with them. I catch myself today trying to be helpful all the time. What that is just built in. It's just help. That growing up, it was great. And it's okay for some things, but there are certain things that I know I didn't need to be helpful with. But also when they're doing things, for me, it's been helpful in the communication process with them, talking to them and encouraging to follow whatever, is I found the tool of just being curious. Just be curious. Say, can you tell me more about that? What do you think? How do you think that's going to turn out? And not have to give them the answers that I think it's going to turn out or anything like that. I think curiosity is really important. And it also, for me, I think it expands them into more communication with me, and it gives them a chance to see, what is it? Why, what is this maybe why I want to do it? And let's talk about it more. Let's see. Talked a lot. I get to use this tool a lot in my work today. I work with elderly and some people with Parkinson's, and there's a lot of things that they can't do today that they're struggling with, and I get to work with them. And one of these things that when I see encouraging and understanding the alcoholic relative, I put that with that too. I use that in that workforce, and I encourage them to try to do things, or and I tell them, I understand how difficult this is. That leg's just not wanting to work today. Let's try this. Let's try that. I just try to encourage them and give them some reason. They're so wonderful and appreciative, and it just fills me up to be able to work with them. But it's taught me how to encourage in a way that's very empathic, and also to where I can help them to understand what's I understand. I'm not there with them, but I get it, and I don't push them, and I can just try to give them encouragement and love and comfort as much as my best. But I love that I can apply this outside in the real world too, to where I work. And if anybody I know, when I worked at a school in younger days, that all of a sudden would be, someone would see my One Day at a Time book when we were on a trip with some of my employees that work with me, and they said, "What is that book?" And I said, "Oh, it's a meditation book that I do." And they said, "Well, what's it about?" And I came clean with them. And I said, it's about families that growing up in alcoholism and stuff. And a person said, "Oh, I've got that. My dad was an alcoholic." And that's my clue is, I encourage them. I'll say, if you ever have any questions or want to go to a meeting, I'm here. If you want to look at the book, you're welcome to do that. And so I can encourage anybody in the outside world, and I don't have to let it just announce it to everybody, but when the time is right, be open to when I hear that somebody might need, maybe this program or something. So, thanks.
The big book on page 75 says, "We feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe." And in tradition 5 in our relationship, we have but one primary purpose: to love each other and to serve as an expression of God's love. And we strive to do God's will together whenever we can. We're a team. I got to remember, we do this one day at a time, and we're in it for the long haul. A lot of people don't seem to want to do that, but we have. One thing that's helped me, I had a lady gave me a bookmark one time in a meeting, and it had a marriage prayer on there, and it's author unknown. And I say this prayer every morning as part of my routine. Lord, help us to remember when we first met and the strong love that grew between us. Help us to work that love into practical things so nothing can divide us. We ask for words both kind and loving, and for hearts always ready to ask forgiveness as well as to forgive. Dear Lord, we put our marriage into your hands. Amen. And I got some copies of that up here if you'd like one. And another thing I have that my sponsor, Buff, every time I would just make a mess of things, he was like, give me one of your business cards. And he'd scribble something on the business card for me to do. And this is one of the things he wrote one day. And this is the 5 rules of relationships. Number 1, be honest. Number 2, add to. Number 3, no expectations. Number 4, don't keep score. That's a hard one. And number 5, trust God. So if you want a copy of this, there's plenty of those up here afterwards. So you want to move on to tradition 6 now.
What was the last one?
Trust God. Tradition 6, the AA version of that is an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. And the Al-Anon version is our family group should never endorse, finance, or lend our name to any outside enterprise lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary spiritual aim. Although a separate entity, we should always cooperate with Alcoholics Anonymous. And so in our relationship, we ought never individually endorse, finance, or lend the other partner's name to any outside enterprise without consent. Problems of money, property, or prestige divert us from our commitment to each other. And what that means is, we like different stuff. We like to spend our money on different stuff, but we don't spend money on, I don't spend money on my stuff unless I ask Diane what she thinks about it, and she does the same with me. A lot of people don't do this, but this is how we do it. Our finances are together, almost, and but it's close enough to where it's all in one. And even in the private accounts that are somebody else's, there's permission to ask or communication about that. So we don't have any secrets about money. I don't have any secrets whatsoever about money with Diane. That makes me feel a whole lot better when I'm that way. That I don't have to worry about, well, I got to hold off over something over here for something. None of that. I'm just tired of all that stress. I'm too old for that stuff. One of the things we had, and by the way, that means things we want to spend money on. That means charities, anything. And I don't obligate Diane for anything, or we don't endorse anything as a couple without checking with the other one. That's we can do that as individuals, but anything that involves a coupleship, we don't do that. And as far as problems of money, as I said last night, or maybe I did, I don't know. When I first got sober, I had my own business, and my business was really failing when I got sober. It was really in bad shape because I made a lot of bad decisions for a lot of years because of my alcoholism. And when I got sober, I thought, man, I'm going to go to work, stay at work, work at work, and everything's going to be fine. And it wasn't. It got worse. My business actually got worse the first couple of years because I'd made all these bad decisions, and I got really discouraged about that. At first, I thought, well, maybe I need to cut back on this AA stuff and get my finances in order, But what I realized is I had to just do both. And so I did both. And eventually I got out of that hole. And so then I thought, well, okay, now I'm sober and I'm on this right track. Man, my business is just going to go through the ionosphere. Everything's going to be wonderful. And about 5 years into sobriety, all of a sudden there were just some factors that happened that my business really got bad. It really got bad. And I thought everything right, but it just got bad. And so I went through this period of time where I actually didn't pay us for like 6 months. And Diane was saying, hey, don't you own this business? Aren't you supposed to get paid first? And I went, no, you get paid last. I got to pay my employees and my vendors and all that stuff. We got to keep this thing going. And again, I thought, well, maybe I need to pull back on my AA commitments and straighten out my business. but I just did both. Because if I don't stay sober, I got nothing. And eventually, I worked my way out of that financial hole, and things got okay. And they stayed pretty okay for a long time till I retired from that business after 33 years. But after I went through that experience, I realized what the money problem was all about. It was not that I thought I was going to be living under the Interstate 40 overpass, under the bridge on the Interstate 40, and my kids eating dog food out of a can. You know, it was, how am I going to look? How am I going to look? You know, here's a guy I thought, you know, this guy had this business and he blew it. You know, that's all what it was all about. And I also found out that what I did for a living really didn't mean a whole lot. I mean, my whole self-esteem was tied up in what I did for a long time. And one time, when I'm about 10 years sober, I don't know why I asked myself this question, probably because I think about me all the time. But I asked myself one time, if I wanted somebody to give me a compliment, the best compliment I could get, what would that be? And without thought, if I wanted you to give me the best compliment that I really wanted to hear, was that I was a hard-working son of a gun. That I was a hard worker. That's what I wanted to hear. Not that I was a good father or a good husband, but that I was this hard worker. And man, I went to this Monday night men's meeting I go to, and I said, look, guys, I can't believe, I mean, that is really shallow. All my life, I'm still thinking I just want to be known as a hard worker. So for like 2 or 3 months after that, when I'd say I'd introduce myself, when I'd share, I'd say, I'm Mike, I'm an alcoholic, and they'd say, yeah, and you're a hard-working SOB. And everybody'd laugh. So that's when I started realizing what's really important in my life. Money, property, and prestige is not my primary purpose. It's to stay sober and to be of useful to another human being. So that's all I got on 6.
Okay,
You
on
could do 7.
tradition 7, self-supporting. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Al-Anon's is every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And the relationship one is each of us strives to be responsible for our own spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being. And this was something really big, because I think spiritually, emotionally, and physically, you know, what I learned in that I'm responsible for that, you know, that I've got to have my spiritual life. I believed I was always working on that. It's always been a growth process, and I feed that to my best ability that I can. I've found, you know, prayer and meditation through the program has helped me for my religious church life, or whatever it is that I go to, feeds me spiritually. I'm in charge of taking care of my spiritual needs, and nobody else. And you know, my self-worth for now, today, comes from, you know, within, from my higher power. What am I doing God's will? You know, that's what my prayer in the 3rd step, 7-step prayers are, to be, you know, of maximum service to God and to everyone around me. And for me, I thought my self-worth and you know, so I was always dependent on Mike and the relationship, because I didn't, when I started having children, I stayed home for the first probably 8 years, I guess, while my children were still home. And once they went to school, I started going back part-time to I don't like to be home by myself. I mean, I'm just not the person that sits home, like he says, I'm sparky, I gotta move, I gotta work, I gotta be doing something. And I know where that comes from. You know, growing up, you couldn't be sitting down when my parents came in the house. You know, you had to be, if you weren't doing something, you were put to work. So you had to disappear real quick when they walked in the door, because I had to be doing something. You know, if you don't have anything to do, I'll find you something to do. And that's still, I have to actually take care of that emotional stuff, a baggage that I came here with, but Al-Anon helps me to clear all that stuff up. Today, I can actually sit down and watch a TV program and not feel guilty sometimes. Sometimes I still get those thoughts. It's, Diane, isn't there something you need to be doing? Don't you need to be working on this tradition stuff? Why are you sitting here watching, you know, those crazy thoughts? I'm responsible for that. I got to take that to my sponsor. I got to take care of that emotionally. And by working the steps, I do that. Let's see. each of us is here to enhance each other's lives, not to be each other's life. Because I was so enmeshed with Mike, you know, we did everything together. It was like I was glued to him or something. And that's where I didn't have any confidence in that if something were to happen to the marriage and stuff, that I'd be okay. You know, people say, you know, you're such a saint for staying and all that, through all that stuff. And I'm like, no, I was scared to death. I was just a little scared chicken. And I couldn't leave out of fear. I had 2 young boys, and I wanted them to have their dad. I loved their dad, and part of me, you know, was scared to leave. I didn't think I'd make it, or I'd be a good mom, or whatever it is. And I'm so grateful that fear was there. Sometimes fear is okay. You know, healthy fear sometimes is okay, but that kept me in the marriage long enough, and I share this from the podium a lot, is that, you know, I was willing to stay in the marriage one day at a time, literally. Ask myself every day, could I stay? Was it? And as long as I saw we were both working our programs and working, you know, that we were taken care of. I was taking care of me. He was taking care of him. We had a counselor, as he said, that was helpful for me. I remember when I learned the word enmeshment and enabling and all that stuff. She said, and she may not have said this, but this is what I think I heard, was that, you know, we're like a railroad track and stuff. And this is his path, that's your path. You're still connected by that path, but you still have to go on your own path and follow your own. And for me, that just gave me, of course, that autonomy came into play. And so for me to be able to start doing things and to remove, I remember, I don't know how long I was in the program and stuff, and I'd been working the steps. I've had several sponsors. One graduated, one divorced, one moved away, and one got ill and stuff. So I've had several sponsors, and I'm not sure which one at the time. But I came to this place of finally surrendering, I think, which gave me the freedom to be able to be confident that I would be okay. It was, I remember surrendering, and I may have been at church or something, I don't know, just meditating or in meditation or something. I remember saying, okay, God, I'm willing to be divorced. And that was a big step for me, because I was going to fight it, and I was going to hang on to it, and I was going to make this thing work no matter what. I was doing everything. I was giving in to everything. I was not self-supporting emotionally at all. It was nothing healthy about what I was doing. I was just, you know, I remember an old-timer one time told me, and I was very new, and in the meeting, and maybe this isn't what you should be doing anymore, but there was a little crosstalk, and she said something about, you're just being a doormat. And I went, whoa, nobody's ever called me that. But it made me wake up. Another time a lady said, and it was in a school group thing that we were doing, an outside thing, but parents' meetings that were to get healthy and all this stuff. The lady asked me, she said, Diane, didn't ask me, asked the whole group, that those 36 faces of different emotions, happy, sad, all that stuff. And we would all go around the room and circle how we were feeling that day. As far as emotionally taking care of myself, I was like, it came to me, and I had nothing circled. I didn't know what I was feeling that day. And I didn't realize I was that void, you know, no emotion whatsoever, because I was so enmeshed with him, is that, you know, if he was happy, guess what, guys? I was happy. If he was sad, guess what? I was sad. If he was angry, guess what? I found something to be angry with. You know, I took on every emotion. I was just like a sponge to all this unhealthy. I didn't have a self. There was no self-supporting anything for me. And the lady, when I came up, I said, I don't know how I'm feeling, really. And her comment to me was, this is pre-program, but it's still a wake-up call for me. She said, in front of everybody, Diane, you are so sick. And some of the parents called me after, I can't believe she said that to you. But for me, I was grateful because it woke me up. Diane, you don't even know how you feel. Why do you not even know how you feel? And see, I didn't go to counselors or any of that kind of stuff because I'm strong. I take care of myself. I'm fine. And that's just, I was so void of all those emotions and stuff. So for me, getting in the program and having to figure this stuff out, I started to get that part-time job when my kids went to school because I wasn't sure, because I was willing to be divorced whether we were going to make it or not. And I thought, I got to start thinking about taking care of myself. So I got a part-time job, and I was already in a part-time job at the time, and I talked to my boss, and I said, I'm really needing a full-time job, and I need insurance and stuff, because his insurance had run out or something. And Al-Anon gave me the courage to go ask for that, to say, this is what my job is now, and this is what I could add to the group. I could add to this job, that I see a need in this situation, that if you're willing, I'd love to come part-time, full-time. And she said, well, I really don't have a position for that or the money right now, but I'll let you know. And like a week before I was in a school system, and she said, before school started, she called me up and she said, Diane, we found the means and we'd like you to come full-time. Al-Anon gave me that. I never would have had the courage to do that. But I started becoming self-supporting in that I added to, and I could take care of financial, and I came to the place where I had to realize I didn't have to live in the house that I was living in. I didn't have to have the stuff that we have. That wasn't important anymore. What was important was that we could raise our kids, we could live in a smaller house, we could live on a lot of fewer things and stuff, but just that we loved each other if it was going to work, and if not, I'd be okay. I just had that power, my higher power. I knew that he was going to take care of me no matter what. So I was able to go to a full-time job and talk for myself and get that going. And also, the last thing, a couple of things about this, the work on the job and stuff. My sponsor at the time had told me that she and her husband had separate accounts. She had one small account that was a special account that was like her personal thing that she added to, and that was for her fun stuff that she wanted to do. And another lady that I worked for at school, she had her sock money. She put money away in her sock that she would do trips or something fun to do with her grandkids. That was her sock money. And that gave me the ability that I started a small account because I didn't know if the marriage was going to survive. And I started adding a small account just for my paycheck to go into. And everything I work goes into that. And then whenever Mike and we discussed the money stuff, whenever we needed, more money in the account to pay for bills, I would take it out and add to that. That wasn't a problem, but it was just there, my safekeeping, that I was going to take care of myself in case it didn't work out. Because that fear for me also was that he was a big person about money, and then we'd divorce and he'd want it all, and I'd be left with nothing. And I had to have something. I have sponsees today that have a little separate account because they're not sure if they want to be able to be safe, and that if something goes away, that they have something, that they can. I know in our Al-Anon book it talks about us, make sure you've got your keys and a little money set aside if the violence or whatever is in the household. Not that that was in our household, but, and that's been my little fun account. And it's just there so that I don't have to ask every time. We both have checkbooks and all that kind of stuff, that's my little fun money that I have, and I get to use it as I wish. But if it's anything, like my sponsor told me at the time, anything over $200, we talk to each other about. If it's anything over that, then other than little things like lures or shoes or whatever, those things we don't have to ask every time we buy something. But it's just there for me, and so that for me, I feel self-supporting in that spiritually and emotionally, and Also, the last thing is physically self-supporting. I take care of myself, my dad was a heart doctor and stuff, so, you know, he was very insistent on always being healthy and stuff and exercising, and I got to see that through his experience growing up, and that's something I've always done, and it helps me physically to stay in shape, and I think it emotionally helps me too, to get rid of any whatever, you know. I think exercise helps me in that way, but I don't overdo it. You know, I also have to be careful and not overdoing it, because I can. I'm easy to do that more. You know, I can find myself hours at the gym. That might include showering too, and all that good stuff too. But there's something here on one of our books, I believe it was Courage to Change, I think I wrote it down, on March 3rd, it's page 63 on Courage to Change. I think this was real important for me on what maturity is. And it says, a recent searching and fearless moral inventory of myself gave me a clear message. Much of my behavior was extremely immature. But what is mature behavior? Obviously, the answer is different for each of us, but exploring the question can help me to identify my goals and apply the Al-Anon program as I seek to change this behavior. And this is the emotionally part of being mature, what maturity actually includes. And these are the things that it says. To me, maturity includes knowing myself, asking for help when I need it, and acting on my own when I don't, admitting when I'm wrong and making amends, accepting love from others, even if I'm having a tough time loving myself, recognizing that I always have choices and take responsibility for the ones I make, seeing that life is a blessing, having an opinion without insisting that others share it, forgiving myself and others, recognizing my shortcomings and my strengths, having the courage to live one day at a time, acknowledging that my needs are my responsibility, caring for people without having to take care of them, accepting that I'll never be finished. I'll always be a work in progress. And so with that, I think I'm going to end tradition 7,
Okay.
11 o'clock.
You know, if we continue to support each other, our relationship grows and it becomes more comfortable. I want to get more comfortable with Diane. And tradition 7 is not just about money. It's about a lot of other things. And I want Diane to be in my life, but she's not my higher power. That's a good thing. Now, what we're going to do, it's 11 o'clock. We're going to take a 10-minute break, come back about 10 after 11, because we've got 4 more traditions to do, and we'll try to wrap this thing up before noon.
And we'll take questions after that.
Thanks.